Hello and welcome. This is video number 6 in an 8-part series on the Industrial Revolution. In today's video, the focus is going to be on socialism. And my goal with this video is to just lay out the basics of what socialism represents. And one of the things I do want to point out before I get into things today is what I'm going to try to do in my talk about socialism today is talk about what pure socialism would be. One of the challenges to talking about the economic systems of socialism and capitalism is that no one really has any experience with a place that operates with either pure socialism or pure capitalism. So whatever views people might have, either favorable or unfavorable about either system, it can be really difficult to ascertain because given that all economic systems are some kind of a blend of the two, it can be hard to know sometimes whether if there's a feature you see that you really like in a system, whether that's truly operating in a capitalist form or a socialist form, or if there's something you see that you dislike. Again, it can be sometimes hard to know if that's purely an aspect of capitalism or purely an aspect of socialism. So at least to help hopefully draw some distinctions between the two, that's what I'm going to do, both with the video right now with socialism and then the next video that's going to address capitalism. So here we go. All right, so starting first with socialism, the main thing I want to speak to here is that the goal and the idea behind the development of socialism was out of a view that what was taking place in society was creating an environment where there was significant inequality between different types of people, in particular, people that were more on the owner's side. So think the factory system of the Industrial Revolution. You had people who owned factories, for example, that had access to a lot of resources and in some cases a lot of wealth. And then you had the worker side, which the workers, especially in early industrial times, were seemingly in a relatively powerless position and one where they didn't have access to a lot of resources and appeared to be exploited. And so the whole idea with socialism was to try to create a system whereby there would be greater equality in society than was true at that time, and with ultimately the goal of eliminating poverty, because something that was pretty evident for a lot of people in early industrialization was the fact that there were a lot of people in a position that we would identify as being in poverty. And so that was one of the key goals with socialism, was to eliminate poverty in society. So whether or not socialism can achieve that may be one thing, but I think it's important to understand what the goal was. And I don't think there's probably very many people that would say, man, that you should definitely maintain a certain degree of poverty in society. That's super important. I mean, I think most people would say if you didn't have to have poverty in society, that'd be great. Now, again, how best to achieve that, that's the real challenge. But that's kind of the sentiment behind at least the beginning or the origins of socialism. Now, the next thing to speak to then would be the factors of production question. So in order to try to create this environment whereby there would be an elimination of poverty and greater equality, how did socialism aim to do that? And so I think looking at the factors of production questions is a good step towards trying to understand how they tried to do that. So again, the factors of production questions are what gets produced, how it gets produced, and who gets what is produced. And with socialism, the answer is actually quite simple. It is the government that answers those questions. So it is the government. And in reality, in a true socialist system, it would probably be either an individual or a small group of individuals that would be specifically answering these questions. And so as far as what gets produced, it would be, we'll say that individual would determine what gets made for the entire society. And so I think that's important to understand about pure socialism, is there would be an individual or a group of individuals that would determine, say, for the next year in a society, what was going to be produced. So if they thought that cell phones were going to be a big deal, and if they thought that the tennis shoes were going to be a big deal, and if they thought that video games were going to be a big deal, well, then that would be produced. And so if those were things that you actually wanted, that'd be great. But if they decided that personal hygiene products were unnecessary and wasteful, so no toothpaste, no deodorant, no bars of soap, if they didn't think those things were worth making, wouldn't matter what everybody else in the society thought. There just simply wouldn't be any toothpaste or deodorant or bars of soap made over the next year. And that's just how that would be. So the next question, determine how things are produced. Again, it'd be this small group of people or this individual would determine how things get made. Once they've decided what they're going to make, determine how those things get made. So that could be, how the factories might operate to produce things, who might get to work in those factories, what those conditions might be like, would all be determined by that individual or that group of individuals. And then the third question, who gets what gets produced. And again, this would be determined with pure socialism. This would be determined by that individual or that group of individuals. And most likely in a socialist system, they would try to set it up such that everybody received those products equally. So if cell phones was something they decided to produce, that was important, that everybody should have one, then everybody would have one. And it wouldn't matter what you as an individual in that society did, whether you had an occupation that might be viewed as extremely important or extremely unimportant, or if you didn't even have anything going on at the time, you would still get your cell phone. And so that's really key with the factors of productions with pure socialism. Wouldn't matter what people wanted, wouldn't matter what people were willing to do or able to do, wouldn't matter what a person's ability to pay might be. Whatever the government decided needed to be available, however they decided to make it available, and whoever they determined was going to get it, that's what would happen with all of those. And one of the challenges that can come up with that, and actually I'll speak to this with the next slide, one of the challenges that can come up with that is that when you have a planned economy, you are inevitably going to struggle to have all the things that people in a society want and need. And it's not for anything sinister. The reality is, if you have an individual or a group of individuals that are making long-term projections over what people are going to want, what people are going to need, what might be needed at different points in times, they're inevitably going to get things wrong. Because no individual and no group of individuals, no matter how smart, no matter how committed, no matter how dedicated, have all the information they need to be able to make accurate long-term decisions. So one of the things that you tend to see with pure socialism are shortages of things that people may want and need, simply because things that may become important wasn't something that was deemed important when it was time to make the decision on what to make. For example, if you end up with a series of really bad weather events whereby it's hard to keep the power on, where it might be nice to have generators. Well, if the central planners didn't think generators needed to be made, then there might not be any generators available when you needed it. So you can end up with shortages. And then also you tend to see a lack of innovation. Everything that happens is determined by this small group of people, individuals themselves don't have any incentive or don't have any reason and maybe no opportunity that if they have their own kind of interesting idea to pursue it and maybe bring something new to become available for society. Unless the planners came up with it, then it wouldn't exist, whatever it might be. And so over time, you tend to not see a lot of new things, and again, you tend to have a lot of shortages. So there can be some real challenges to having specific things that people might want and need at any point in time, unless the planners happen to get lucky and determine in advance things that people are going to want and need. Now, one other thing to mention with socialism, I want to mention a few individuals with each, capitalism and socialism. And with socialism, Karl Marx is a pretty notorious name, noteworthy name. He's probably most noted for being a co-author to a pamphlet called the Communist Manifesto. And from Marx's perspective, and first of all, it's important to keep in mind, he was writing during a time where there were a lot of problems with early industrialization. And at the time, he and a lot of people foresaw those problems being permanent, that's just how it was with industrialization. And he gets into real social issues with his view on socialism. He had the view that really throughout time, there was competition between what he called the haves and the have-nots. His fancy word for that would be the bourgeoisie and the proletariat in the context of industrialization, the owners versus the workers. And basically, the way he saw it, the people on the power side, so the haves or the owners, they controlled the factors of production. They had access to all the wealth. They had access to all the resources. And the workers had nothing but their labor to offer. And as a result, they were exploited by the owners. And so he said this had been going on for a long time, and that the Industrial Revolution just exploited that and really amplified that. And what Marx foresaw happening is that in this state of inequality, that eventually, because the sheer numbers favored those that were being exploited, the workers or the have-nots, that at one point they would rise up and overthrow the owners. And when that would happen, then everybody would share in everything equally. And ultimately what would come about would be a classless society with total equality. This gets to what we usually call communism. And with a communist state, there wouldn't be any private ownership. Everybody would share in everything equally. And that in this state of equality, everything would be great. Now, as far as ideas like Marx's coming true or pure socialism happening, the places that have come closest to doing it might be China under Mao Zedong, Soviet Union, Cuba under Castro. And one of the things that you tend to see there are a lot of challenges and a lot of problems. And so that's not to say that everything about socialism is bad, but as far as achieving the goals of well, I suppose in terms of achieving the goals of equality, there might be a certain state of equality, but not necessarily the kind of prosperity that a lot of people might like. So anyway, I think this is a good place to go ahead and end the discussion on socialism. In the next video, I'll talk about capitalism the same way and just try to identify some of the ways that capitalism is different from socialism. Hopefully you're finding this helpful. Thanks for watching.